Across the rugged wilderness of Wyoming's Wind River Range, the golden sunrise bathes the rolling hills in warm amber light, creating a breathtaking tapestry of shadows and brilliance. Through the morning mist that hovers above the sagebrush, plains, Elena Blackwood, a dedicated horse sanctuary manager, embarks on her dawn patrol with a heart filled with reverence for the untamed spirits that roam these ancestral lands. Since childhood, she had dreamed of protecting America's wild mustangs. And now the Horizon Freedom Reserve was where that dream had taken root and flourished into reality. Every morning before setting out, Elena methodically checks her weathered pickup truck, ensuring she's packed essential supplies, fresh water, first aid equipment for injured animals, binoculars, and enough emergency rations to sustain her if she ventured far from the sanctuary's boundaries. Her daily patrols served multiple purposes: monitoring the health of the Mustang herds, documenting their movements, and protecting them from the various threats that endangered their diminishing numbers in the modern world. Elena pulls her worn leather hat lower to shield her eyes from the strengthening sunlight. The truck bounces over the uneven terrain as she navigates across the sprawling 5,000-acre sanctuary that borders public rangeland, where several bands of wild mustangs still run free. The reserve had been established 15 years ago by her late mentor James Redfeather, a Shoshone elder who had fought tirelessly to create a safe haven for these living symbols of American heritage. When James passed away 3 years ago, he left the sanctuary in Elena's capable hands, knowing her unwavering dedication would ensure his legacy continued. She slows the vehicle near a ridge overlooking a valley where the morning star herd often grazed at this time of day. Elena cuts the engine, grabs her binoculars, and steps out into the crisp mountain air that carries the scent of wildflowers and sage. The silence is profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through the grass and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Through her binoculars, she spots the familiar sight of the morning star herd, 23 mustangs led by a magnificent black stallion she had named Midnight. Watching the herd graze peacefully brings a smile to Elena's face. Each Mustang has a distinct personality that she has come to know over years of observation. Midnight, the proud leader, always vigilant for potential threats. Aurora, his loyal mate, gentle yet fiercely protective of their offspring. Storm, a young stallion challenging for position within the herd hierarchy. These wild horses represent something profound to Elena: freedom in its purest form, resilience against all odds, a connection to the untamed heart of America that was rapidly disappearing. The sanctuary itself sits at the intersection of worlds, bordered by national forest, private ranches, and lands leased for cattle grazing. This position created constant tension as conflicts between wild horse advocates and ranchers periodically flared up over land use rights. Elena had learned to navigate these complex relationships, building fragile alliances with some neighboring ranchers, while facing ongoing hostility from others who viewed the mustangs as competition for valuable grazing resources. After observing the Morning Star herd for nearly an hour, Elena returns to her truck to continue her patrol. She follows a winding dirt road that traces the sanctuary's eastern boundary, an area where unauthorized cattle occasionally wandered onto protected land. As she drives, her thoughts drift to the upcoming fundraising gala she's organizing in the nearby town of Riverton. The sanctuary operates on donations and grants, and the financial situation had become increasingly precarious over the past year. Without additional funding, they might be forced to scale back their conservation efforts or worse, reduce the protected acreage. The sudden sound of her radio crackling to life pulls Elena from her worried thoughts. Elena, do you copy? The voice belongs to Maya Ortiz, the sanctuary's veterinarian and Elena's closest friend. What's up? Just got a call from Tim Lawson over at the Diamond L Ranch. Says he spotted what looked like a young foal separated from its herd near his south pasture, close to where his land meets ours. Might be worth checking out. Elena's brow furrows with concern. I'll head that way now. Thanks for the heads up. She makes a sharp turn, redirecting toward the sanctuary's southern boundary. Tim Lawson was one of the few neighboring ranchers who maintained a cordial relationship with the sanctuary, occasionally alerting them to issues concerning the wild horses, despite pressure from other ranchers to present a united front against the horse people, as they sometimes derisively called Elena and her small team. The terrain grows more challenging. As Elena navigates toward the Diamond L boundary, the landscape transitioning from open grassland to rocky, uneven ground, dotted with juniper and scrub oak. After 20 minutes of careful driving, she reaches a rise that overlooks the area Tim had described. Parking her truck, Elena grabs her binoculars again and scans the landscape methodically. At first, she sees nothing unusual, just the typical pattern of sagebrush and rock formations stretching toward the horizon. But then, a flash of movement catches her eye. Focusing her binoculars, Elena's heart sinks at what she discovers: a young Palomino foal, no more than 3 months old, struggling near a dilapidated fence line that separates the sanctuary land from the Diamond L Ranch. Even from this distance, Elena can see the foal's distress. Its movements are erratic and panicked as it pulls against something Elena can't quite make out. Without hesitation, she grabs her emergency kit from the truck and begins making her way down the slope toward the young Mustang, moving deliberately to avoid startling the already frightened animal. As she draws closer, the full situation becomes heartbreakingly clear. The foal has become entangled in a section of old barbed wire, remnants of a fence that should have been removed years ago when the sanctuary established its boundaries. The cruel metal barbs have caught in the foal's golden coat, digging into its right flank and hind leg. Small streaks of blood stain the young horse's coat, and Elena can see that the more it struggles, the deeper the barbs dig. Her heart races as she approaches slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. Easy there, little one. Easy now. I'm here to help you. The foal's eyes roll with fear at Elena's approach, its nostrils flaring as it attempts to rear up, only to be yanked back by the unforgiving wire. Elena stops, giving the frightened animal a moment to register her presence, without perceiving her as an additional threat. Wild mustangs, even young ones, instinctively fear humans. Centuries of being hunted and rounded up have ingrained this wariness into their very nature. I know you're scared, Elena continues in the same gentle voice, inching forward again, but I need you to trust me just for a little while. The foal makes another desperate attempt to free itself, and Elena winces as she sees fresh blood appear where the barbs tear at tender flesh. She needs to act quickly before the foal injures itself more severely. but approaching a panicked wild horse requires extreme caution. One kick from those powerful legs, even from a young foal, could cause serious injury. Reaching into her pocket, Elena pulls out a small bag of dried apples, a treat she always carries during her patrols. She holds out her palm with a few pieces, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. The sweet scent catches the foal's attention, momentarily distracting it from its fear and pain. "That's it," Elena murmurs. "Just stay calm." While the foal's attention is divided between fear and curiosity about the offered treat, Elena carefully closes the remaining distance. She's now close enough to fully assess the situation. 3 strands of rusted barbed wire have wrapped around the foal's right hind leg and across its flank. The injuries don't appear life-threatening, but they will certainly become infected if not treated soon. Elena sets down her emergency kit and pulls out heavy wire cutters and thick leather gloves. The foal's ears pin back at the metallic sound of the cutters, but Elena continues her gentle monologue, keeping her voice steady and reassuring despite the urgency of the situation. "I'm going to get you free, little sunshine. Just a few more minutes and you'll be back with your family." As she prepares to cut the wire, Elena wonders which herd this foal belongs to. Its distinctive palomino coloring isn't common among the Morning Star band. Perhaps it's from the Eastern Ridge herd that occasionally ventures onto sanctuary land from the neighboring public rangeland. Regardless, her immediate priority is freeing the young Mustang and treating its wounds. With practiced hands, Elena begins carefully cutting the barbed wire, starting with the strand furthest from the foal's body to minimize the risk of causing additional injury. The rusted metal resists at first, requiring significant pressure from the wire cutters. With each snip, the foal flinches, but Elena's soothing voice seems to be having some effect as it stands slightly calmer now, though still trembling with fear and pain. "Almost there, little one. You're being so brave." As Elena works on the final strand, the one most deeply embedded in the foal's flesh, she hears a sound that makes her blood run cold, the thundering of hooves approaching rapidly from behind her. Wild Mustangs are intensely protective of their young, and Elena realizes with sudden clarity that she's positioned herself between an injured foal and what is likely its very concerned and potentially aggressive family. Still focused on freeing the foal, Elena glances over her shoulder and sees a sight that simultaneously awes and terrifies her. Charging toward them is a magnificent palomino mare, her golden coat gleaming in the sunlight, followed closely by 5 other Mustangs, including a powerful buckskin stallion with a distinctive white blaze down his face. "Easy, easy," Elena whispers, working frantically now to cut through the last strand of wire before the approaching horses reach them. The foal, sensing its family approaching, begins struggling with renewed vigor, complicating Elena's efforts. With one final, powerful squeeze of the wire cutters, the last strand breaks. The foal immediately pulls away, stumbling slightly as its injured leg takes weight. As the young Mustang limps toward the approaching herd, Elena quickly backs away, giving the wild horses the space they need for their reunion, while also protecting herself from potential aggression. The palomino mare, clearly the foal's mother, reaches her baby first, nickering softly as she inspects the injured youngster. The other Mustangs form a protective circle around the pair, with the buckskin stallion positioning himself between the herd and Elena, his stance wary but not overtly aggressive as he assesses whether she represents a continued threat. For a breathtaking moment, Elena finds herself standing less than 30 feet from a family of wild mustangs, close enough to see the intelligence in their eyes, the powerful muscles rippling beneath their coats, the complex social dynamics playing out in their positioning and behavior. Despite having worked with mustangs for years, moments like these remain rare and precious. Elena holds her breath, remaining perfectly still as the buckskin stallion paws the ground, sending dust swirling into the air. His ears flick forward and back, assessing her as a potential threat while the mare continues to nuzzle and inspect her wounded foal. Elena knows that any sudden movement could trigger the stallion's protective instincts, transforming this tense standoff into a dangerous confrontation. The foal, despite its injuries, presses against its mother's flank, drawing comfort from her. Familiar scent and warmth. Elena can see the wounds more clearly now, angry red lines where the barbed wire had cut into the young horse's golden coat. The injuries need cleaning and treatment to prevent infection, but approaching the foal again, with its protective family present, would be foolhardy. Slowly, with deliberate movements, Elena begins to back away. She maintains eye contact with the stallion, not as a challenge, but as a sign of respect between two beings. The powerful horse watches her retreat, his posture gradually relaxing as the distance between them increases. "Take care of your little Elena murmurs, her voice barely above a whisper as she continues her cautious withdrawal. Once she's put about 50 yards between herself and the Mustang family, Elena turns and makes her way back up the slope toward her truck. She climbs inside, but doesn't start the engine immediately. Instead, she pulls out a notebook and quickly sketches the distinctive markings of the buckskin stallion and Palomino mare. She notes the time, location, and approximate age of the foal, along with details of its injuries. Documentation is a crucial part of her work, helping the sanctuary track the various family bands that move through their protected lands. After completing her notes, Elena starts the truck and carefully navigates away from the area, giving the wild horses plenty of space to attend to their injured young one. As she drives, her mind replays the encounter, the terror in the foal's eyes, the sharp contrast of crimson blood against golden coat, the magnificent charge of the protective family unit. These are the moments that remind her why she dedicated her life to protecting these magnificent creatures. Back at the sanctuary headquarters, a collection of weathered buildings nestled in a protected valley, Elena finds Maya preparing medications. In the small veterinary clinic they'd established 3 years ago. "Found the foal," Elena announces as she enters, hanging her hat on a hook by the door. "Caught in old barbed wire at the south boundary. Got it free, but couldn't treat the wounds. Family showed up." Maya looks up from her work, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "How bad were the injuries?" "Several lacerations on the right hind leg and flank. Nothing life-threatening if infection doesn't set in." Elena pours herself a cup of coffee from the pot that perpetually simmers in the clinic. The interesting thing is the family group. A buckskin stallion with a white blaze and a Palomino mare. I don't recognize them from our regular herds. Could be from the public lands to the south, Maya suggests, capping a bottle of antiseptic solution. There's been more movement between territories lately. The drought has horses searching farther for water and grazing. Elena nods, warming her hands around the coffee mug. The sanctuary has several water sources that remain reliable even during dry spells, making it an attractive refuge for wild herds when natural water becomes scarce elsewhere. I'll keep an eye out for them on tomorrow's patrol, Elena decides. If the foal's wounds look like they're getting infected, we might need to intervene. Maya gives her a knowing look. And by intervene, you mean dart the foal for treatment while somehow keeping its very protective family from trampling you. Elena grins, acknowledging the inherent risk. Something like that. Speaking of protective, this stallion was impressive. Powerful. Build intelligent eyes, clearly dominant but not unnecessarily aggressive. Sounds like someone has a crush, Maya teases, earning a playful eye roll from Elena. Professional admiration, Elena corrects her friend. It's just nice to see a strong family band in these times when so many herds are fragmented by roundups and relocations. The conversation shifts to sanctuary business, fence repairs needed on the western boundary, the upcoming visit from potential donors, preparations for winter hay storage. Elena and Maya, along with 3 part-time staff members, manage the entire operation on a shoestring budget, each wearing multiple hats to keep the sanctuary functioning. Later that evening, as dusk settles over the Wind River Range, Elena sits on the small porch of her cabin, a simple one-room structure that serves as her home on sanctuary grounds. The sunset paints the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, silhouetting the distant mountains. In her lap rests her grandfather's old journal, its leather cover worn smooth by decades of handling. Elena's grandfather had been a rancher, who, unlike many of his contemporaries, developed a deep respect for the wild mustangs that shared the rangeland with his cattle. His detailed observations of Mustang behavior, meticulously recorded in this journal, had inspired Elena's lifelong passion for these animals. Now, she adds her own observations to the legacy, documenting what she witnessed today with the injured foal and its family. As darkness falls, Elena retires inside, setting her alarm for pre-dawn. Her concerns about the injured foal make sleep elusive, her mind cycling through scenarios for monitoring its recovery without disturbing the wary family. Eventually, fatigue overtakes worry, and she drifts off to the distant sound of coyotes calling across the valley. Morning arrives with a gentle rain pattering against the cabin's metal roof. Elena dresses quickly, pulling on waterproof gear before heading to the main building for a quick breakfast with Maya, who arrived early to prepare medications for a scheduled visit to a neighboring ranch where they provide veterinary care for domestic horses, one of the ways the sanctuary supplements its limited income. I'll check on our injured foal while I'm out, Elena promises as she packs extra medical supplies into her saddlebags. Today's weather makes the truck impractical for certain areas of the sanctuary, so she's opted to ride Whisper, her grey Appaloosa mare who's steady in all conditions. Be careful, Maya cautions. Wet ground means increased risk of slipping, and those Mustangs will be even more on edge in this weather. Elena acknowledges the warning with a nod before heading to the stable. 20 minutes later, she and Whisper are making their way across the rain-dampened landscape, following a different route than yesterday to approach the area where she encountered the injured foal. The rain has softened to a misty drizzle, limiting visibility but enhancing the earthy scents of sage and wet soil. Traveling on horseback changes the dynamics of Elena's patrol. Wild Mustangs respond differently to a human on horseback versus one in a vehicle, sometimes with less fear, recognizing the familiar silhouette of another equine. Whisper, trained specifically for this work, moves with quiet confidence across the sanctuary lands. As they crest a small rise, Elena spots movement in the valley below. A small band of horses grazing despite the dreary weather. She guides Whisper to a sheltered position beneath a cluster of juniper trees and raises her binoculars. Her pulse quickens as she recognizes the buckskin stallion with the distinctive white blaze. The family group has moved about a mile from yesterday's location, but remains within sanctuary boundaries. Elena counts 7 horses total: the stallion, the Palomino mare, the injured foal, and 4 other mares of varying colors. A typical family band structure, with the lead stallion and his harem of mares with their offspring. Elena focuses her binoculars on the injured foal, trying to assess its condition from a distance. The young horse is moving with its mother, showing a slight but noticeable limp. It seems alert and is grazing alongside the adults. Positive signs that the injuries haven't developed serious complications overnight. What do you think, Whisper? Elena murmurs to her mount, who flicks an ear back at the sound of her voice. Should we get a closer look? The Appaloosa snorts softly in response, shifting her weight as raindrops trickle down her dappled coat. Elena weighs her options carefully. Approaching the herd directly might cause them to flee, potentially aggravating the foal's injuries. Yet she needs a better view to properly assess its condition. She decides on a compromise, guiding Whisper in a wide circle to approach from downwind, using the contours of the land to mask their advance. Moving slowly and deliberately, they draw closer to the grazing mustangs without immediately attracting attention. At about 100 yards distance, Elena dismounts, dropping Whisper's reins to ground-tie the well-trained mare. She continues, forward on foot, moving in a low crouch to use the sagebrush as cover. The rain works to her advantage, dampening sounds and carrying her scent away from the sensitive nostrils of the wild horses. At 60 yards, Elena settles into a protected hollow and raises her binoculars again. From this vantage point, she can clearly see the foal's injuries. The cuts are angry and red against the golden coat, but they don't show the telltale swelling and discharge that would indicate serious infection. The young horse favors its injured leg, but puts weight on it while grazing, another encouraging sign. As Elena watches, something remarkable happens. The Palomino mare suddenly raises her head, nostrils flaring as she tests the air. Despite Elena's downwind position, something has alerted the sensitive animal to a presence. Instead of signaling alarm to the herd, however, the mare looks directly toward Elena's position, ears pricked forward in what appears to be recognition rather than fear. For a breathtaking moment, their gazes lock across the distance, human and wild horse regarding each other with mutual awareness. Then, incredibly, the mare begins walking toward her, leaving the safety of the herd. The buckskin stallion notices immediately, raising his head from grazing to track his mate's unexpected movement. He gives a soft, nickering call that seems to question her actions, but doesn't move to stop her. Elena remains frozen in place, barely, breathing as the Palomino mare approaches with deliberate steps. At 30 yards, the mare stops, still staring directly at Elena. It's as if she's making a decision, weighing something in that mysterious equine consciousness that humans can only glimpse, but never fully comprehend. The mare tosses her head, her long mane dancing in the misty rain before turning back toward her family. But instead of rejoining them directly, she makes a clear circular detour that brings her around to where her foal grazes. With gentle nudges, she guides the young horse a few steps closer to Elena's position before stopping again. Elena watches in astonishment as the mare positions herself in the foal, presenting the injured side clearly visible from Elena's vantage point. The message seems unmistakable. She's showing Elena the wounds, almost inviting assessment. "That's impossible," Elena whispers to herself, yet the evidence before her eyes suggests otherwise. Wild horses are intelligent, sensitive creatures with complex social structures and long memories. Could this mare somehow understand that Elena had helped her foal? Could she be deliberately seeking that help again? For several minutes, the tableau holds. The mare standing protectively beside her injured offspring, both facing Elena's position, while the rest of the herd grazes nearby under the stallion's watchful eye. Then, as if satisfied that her message has been received, the Palomino mare guides her foal back to the safety of the family group. Elena remains in her hollow, processing what she's witnessed. In 15 years of working with wild mustangs, she's never experienced anything quite like this deliberate communication from a completely untamed horse. The encounter challenges everything she thought she knew about these animals, suggesting depths of intelligence and awareness that exceed conventional understanding. When she finally returns to Whisper, Elena's mind is racing with possibilities. If the mare is indeed seeking help for her foal, how might Elena provide it without triggering the stallion's protective instincts? And what does this unusual behavior suggest about the capacity of these wild creatures to recognize and remember human allies? As she mounts Whisper for the ride back to headquarters, Elena glances over her shoulder at the grazing family band. The rain has stopped, and shafts of sunlight break through the clouds, illuminating the mustangs with an almost ethereal glow. The buckskin stallion stands on a slight rise, his powerful silhouette backlit by the strengthening light, watching as Elena and Whisper depart. In that moment, Elena feels a connection forming, tenuous yet profound, between herself and these wild spirits. Something extraordinary has begun in these rain-washed hills, something that transcends the traditional boundaries between human and wild horse. Whatever unfolds from here, Elena knows she has been granted a rare privilege, a glimpse into the complex inner world of one of nature's most magnificent creatures. With this awareness comes renewed purpose. Elena guides Whisper toward home, already formulating plans to return tomorrow with the supplies needed to treat the foal's wounds. If the remarkable Palomino mare indeed offers that opportunity again. Back at the sanctuary headquarters, Elena bursts through the door of the veterinary clinic, startling Maya, who nearly drops the medication she's measuring. "You're not going to believe what just happened," Elena announces, her eyes bright with excitement as she sheds her rain gear. Quickly, she recounts the extraordinary interaction with the Palomino mare, how the wild horse seemed to recognize her approach deliberately and then position her injured foal for Elena's inspection. Maya listens with growing astonishment, her scientific mind initially skeptical but unable to dismiss Elena's detailed observations. "That's remarkable. If you're right about what you saw, it suggests a level of cognitive processing we don't typically attribute to wild horses." "I know how it sounds," Elena acknowledges, running a hand through her wind-blown hair. "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might not believe it either. But Maya, there was intention there, communication. I'm certain of it." The veterinarian considers this as she caps the medication bottle she'd been working with. There are documented cases of wild animals seeking human help when injured or in distress. Elephants have been known to approach ranger stations with injuries. Dolphins sometimes present themselves to divers when entangled in fishing line. Exactly. Elena paces the small clinic, energy radiating from her. What if these Mustangs, at least this particular mare, have that same capacity? What if she's recognized me as someone who helped her foal and is now deliberately seeking further assistance? It's possible, Maya concedes. The question is, what do we do with this opportunity, assuming she offers it again? Elena stops pacing, her expression turning serious. I want to try treating the foal's wounds, not capture, not intervention, with tranquilizers. Just a straightforward approach with medical supplies and respect for their boundaries. Maya raises an eyebrow. With a protective stallion and 5 other mares watching, that's incredibly risky, Elena. I know, Elena admits. But if I'm right about what the mare was communicating, she might actually facilitate the treatment. And if I'm wrong, if I've misinterpreted everything, I'll back off immediately at the first sign of aggression. Maya sighs, recognizing the familiar determination in her friend's voice. At least let me prepare proper supplies for you. If you're going to do this, you should have everything you might need. Together, they assemble a specialized medical kit designed for quick, minimally invasive wound treatment, antimicrobial spray that can be applied from a distance, a long-handled swab applicator for topical antibiotics, and several other tools that would allow Elena to treat the foal while maintaining a safe distance from the potentially dangerous adults. I'll go back tomorrow morning, Elena decides as they finish packing the supplies. Same approach, on horseback, downwind. If the mare offers the same opportunity, I'll take it. If not, I'll continue monitoring from a distance. Maya nods, concern evident in her expression. Just promise me you'll prioritize your safety. An injured human won't do that foal or any other Mustang any good. I promise, Elena assures her, though they both know her dedication to these wild horses sometimes pushes the boundaries of caution. That evening, Elena can barely focus on her administrative tasks. Donor correspondence and budget projections for the upcoming quarter. Her mind keeps returning to the Palomino mare and the wounded foal, replaying the extraordinary interaction in the Misty Valley. She sketches the mare's distinctive markings in her grandfather's journal, writing detailed notes about the horses' behavior alongside observations about her family structure. Just before sunset, Elena takes a walk to a high point near her cabin that overlooks much of the sanctuary's eastern section. The sky has cleared after the day's rain, painting the landscape in rich golden light. In the distance, she can see several of the resident herds grazing peacefully across the protected valleys. The Mustangs have thrived here, safe from the helicopter roundups and population control measures that threaten their kind on public lands. As darkness falls, Elena prepares her gear for the next day's attempt, checking and double-checking the medical supplies, laying out her riding clothes, and setting her alarm for first light. Sleep comes fitfully, her dreams filled with running horses and piercing equine gazes that seem to hold ancient wisdom. Dawn breaks clear and cool, the world washed clean by yesterday's rain. Elena dresses quickly and makes her way to the stables, where Whisper greets her with a soft nicker. The Appaloosa seems to sense something special about today's ride, standing unusually still as Elena tacks her up and secures the saddlebags containing the medical supplies. "We're going to try something. A little different today, girl," Elena murmurs as she swings into the saddle. "I need you to be steady no matter what happens." They set out as the first golden rays of sunlight touch the eastern hills, following the same route as yesterday toward the area where Elena had last seen the Mustang family. The morning air carries the scent of sage and damp earth and meadowlarks. Call from fence posts as they pass. After about 40 minutes of riding, Eleanor spots movement in the same valley where she'd encountered the herd yesterday. Her pulse quickens as she guides Whisper to a vantage point sheltered by a stand of juniper trees. Through her binoculars, she confirms what she'd hoped. The buckskin stallion and his family have remained in the area, grazing peacefully in the morning light. Elena studies the group carefully, noting that the injured foal appears to be moving with slightly more ease today, though still favoring its wounded leg. The Palomino mare grazes close to her offspring, occasionally raising her head to scan their surroundings with alert vigilance. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Elena urges Whisper forward at a walk, choosing a path that will bring them downwind of the Mustang herd while remaining clearly visible. She wants the wild horses to see her approach. No surprises, no sudden appearances that might trigger their flight response. The buckskin stallion notices them first, raising his head sharply, ears pricked forward as he assesses the potential threat. He gives a short, sharp snort that alerts the other horses, and the entire family group turns to watch Elena and Whisper's approach. Elena stops at approximately 200 yards, dismounting slowly and dropping Whisper's reins to ground tie. From her saddlebags, she retrieves the medical kit Maya had prepared, slinging its strap across her body. Then, moving with deliberate calm, she begins walking toward the herd, stopping every few yards to allow the Mustangs time to observe her and become comfortable with her presence. At about 100 yards, the stallion paws the ground and takes several steps toward her, his head held high in a display of protective dominance. Elena immediately stops, standing quietly and averting, her direct gaze slightly to avoid challenging him. For several tense moments, horse and human regard each other across the distance, engaged in a silent negotiation of boundaries and intentions. Then, remarkably, the Palomino mare moves forward, positioning herself between Elena and the stallion. The two horses exchange soft nickers, an equine conversation Elena can only guess at. The mare turns toward Elena, her intelligent eyes seeming to recognize the human who had freed her foal from the barbed wire's cruel grip. With her heart pounding, Elena takes a calculated risk. She sits down cross-legged on the ground, making herself smaller and less threatening. From the medical kit, she pulls out a soft cloth and the bottle of antiseptic solution, holding them visible in her hands. Then she waits, leaving the next. Move to the wild horses. For several minutes, nothing happens. The stallion remains alert but has stopped his warning display. The other mares and the foal continue grazing, though all maintain awareness of the human intruder in their midst. The Palomino mare stands motionless, watching Elena with an intensity that seems to transcend the natural wariness of wild animals. Toward humans. Then, with a grace that takes Elena's breath away, the mare begins walking directly toward her. Each step is deliberate, measured, betraying neither fear nor aggression, simply purpose. Behind her, the foal follows, limping slightly, but staying close to its mother's flank. The stallion snorts again, clearly uncomfortable with this development, but remarkably he doesn't intervene. It's as if he's deferring to his mate's judgment. In this unprecedented situation, though he remains vigilant, ready to charge if Elena makes any threatening movement. 50 yards becomes 30, then 20. Elena remains perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe as the Palomino mare approaches with her injured offspring. At about 15 yards, the mare stops, nickering softly to the foal, who hesitates briefly before moving slightly ahead of its mother. With exquisite care, the mare positions herself and the foal at an angle that clearly presents the wounded flank to Elena, while still allowing both horses a clear path to retreat if necessary. The message seems unmistakable. Here is my child. Here are the wounds. Help us if you can. Thank you for trusting me, Elena whispers, her voice barely audible even to herself. Moving with extreme slowness, she rises to her knees, keeping her posture low and unthreatening. The next 10 minutes unfold like a dream, a sacred dance between species that defies conventional understanding of wild animal behavior. The mare remains steady as Elena inches forward on her knees, stopping whenever the horses show signs of tension, advancing only when they seem calm. Eventually, incredibly, Elena finds herself kneeling just a few feet from the injured foal. The young Mustang trembles slightly but doesn't flee, seemingly taking courage from its mother's extraordinary calm. The wounds are clearly visible now. 3 angry lacerations where the barbed wire had cut into the golden coat, the edges crusted with dried blood and dirt. Speaking in a soft, continuous murmur, Elena prepares the antiseptic solution and soaks the cloth. This will feel cold, little one. It might sting a bit, but it will help you heal. With infinite gentleness, she extends her arm, moving the cloth toward the nearest wound. The foal flinches at the first contact, but then stands remarkably still as Elena carefully cleans away the dirt and dried blood. The Palomino mare watches intently, occasionally nickering soft reassurance to her offspring. The buckskin stallion has drawn closer during this process, his powerful presence a constant reminder of the wild, unpredictable nature of this interaction. He stands about 30 feet away, muscles tense, ready to defend his family at the slightest provocation. Yet something, perhaps trust in his mate's judgment, perhaps some deeper understanding of Elena's intentions, keeps him from charging. Elena works methodically, cleaning each wound before applying the antibacterial spray that will protect against infection. The foal winces at the spray's cold sensation but doesn't pull away. Lastly, she applies a thin layer of healing salve using the long-handled applicator that allows her to reach without pressing closer to the nervous young horse. "There you go," she murmurs as she finishes treating the final wound. "That should help you heal faster and keep infection away." As if understanding her words, the Palomino mare steps forward and gently nudges her foal back toward the safety of the herd. But before retreating, the mare does something that Elena will remember for the rest of her life. She lowers her head until her soft muzzle nearly touches Elena's outstretched hand, not quite making contact, but close enough that Elena can feel the warm exhalation of her breath. It's not the trusting nuzzle of a domestic horse, but something far more profound, a wild creature acknowledging a connection across the vast gulf that separates their worlds. For 3 heartbeats, the mare holds this position, her dark eyes locked with Elena's. Then she tosses her head and turns, guiding her foal back to where the stallion waits. Elena remains kneeling in the grass, watching as the family group gradually returns to grazing, though the stallion continues to watch her with vigilant eyes. Eventually, she backs away slowly, retrieving her medical kit before returning to where Whisper patiently waits. As she mounts the Appaloosa and begins the ride back to the sanctuary headquarters, Elena feels transformed by the encounter. In 15 years of working with mustangs, she's witnessed countless examples of their intelligence and complex social structures, but nothing that approaches the level of trust and communication she just experienced with the Palomino mare. The implications stagger her. If wild horses, at least some individuals, possess this capacity for recognizing human assistance and deliberately seeking it out, how might that change conservation approaches? How might it reshape humanity's relationship with these magnificent creatures that have shared our history for thousands of years? Back at the sanctuary, Maya listens in amazed silence as Elena recounts the extraordinary interaction. "I've never heard of anything like this with completely wild mustangs," the veterinarian finally says when Elena finishes her tale. "It challenges everything we think we know about their behavior toward humans." "I know," Elena agrees, still processing the experience herself. "It was like she recognized me as an ally. Like she understood I'd helped her foal before and could help again. Will you try to find them tomorrow? See if the treatment is working?" Elena nods, already planning her route. "Absolutely. I want to monitor those wounds, make sure they're healing properly, and I want to document this behavior as thoroughly as possible." That night, Elena sits on her cabin porch long after darkness has fallen, writing detailed notes in her grandfather's journal by the light of a small lantern. Beyond the circle of warm light, the vast Wyoming wilderness stretches into darkness, home to the wild spirits that had touched her life so profoundly today. Somewhere out there, under the same star-filled sky, the Palomino mare stands guard over her healing foal, perhaps remembering the strange human who had twice now offered help when it was most needed. The distance between their worlds seems both vast and paper-thin, separated only by the thin membrane of mutual trust that had formed between them. Tomorrow would bring another dawn, another opportunity to build on that trust. And Elena can hardly wait to see what new wonders it might reveal. 3 weeks pass, each day bringing Elena back to observe the Mustang family. Her initial treatment of the foal's wounds proved remarkably effective, the angry red lacerations gradually healing into thin pink lines against the golden coat. The young horse now moves without limping, frolicking with newfound energy across the sanctuary's rolling hills. What began as medical necessity has evolved into something far more profound. Each visit strengthens the unusual bond forming between Elena and the wild horses, particularly the Palomino mare, whom she's named Esperanza, Spanish for hope. The name feels fitting for a creature whose trust has opened a window into possibilities Elena never imagined. On her 5th visit after the treatment, Esperanza had approached Elena directly, without the foal, standing just 10 feet away for several minutes in what felt like silent communion before rejoining her family. By the 10th visit, the mare would graze calmly while Elena sat cross-legged in the grass, documenting the herd's behaviors in her grandfather's journal. The buckskin stallion, whom Elena now calls Viento, meaning wind, remains more cautious, but has gradually accepted her periodic presence on the periphery of his domain. Today marks Elena's 15th consecutive visit to the Mustang family's preferred grazing area. As she rides Whisper over a familiar ridge, she spots them immediately in the valley below. 7 wild mustangs moving with fluid grace across the landscape. Elena dismounts and ground ties Whisper beneath the shade of a gnarled juniper tree, then settles herself on a large flat rock overlooking the valley, binoculars in hand. The golden foal, whom Elena has named Solana, Sunlight, races alongside another young horse, their slender legs stretching in exuberant play. There's no trace of the injury that nearly claimed her life. She moves with the perfect, untamed freedom that defines these magnificent creatures. Elena watches, smiling, as Solana darts away from her playmate, circling back to Esperanza, who grazes peacefully nearby. The mother nuzzles her offspring briefly, before raising her head, scanning the ridgeline as she does at the beginning of each of Elena's visits. When Esperanza spots the familiar human silhouette, she pauses her grazing, ears pricked forward in recognition. What happens next still takes Elena's breath away, even though it has occurred several times now. Esperanza begins walking deliberately toward the ridge where Elena sits watching. Not running, not approaching with the wariness wild mustangs typically display toward humans, but moving with purpose, and what Elena can only interpret as recognition. Viento notices his mate's departure and raises his head sharply, nostrils flaring as he identifies Elena's scent on the gentle breeze. Unlike the first encounters, he no longer displays aggressive posturing, though he remains vigilant, watching the interaction with intelligent eyes that seem to hold complex emotions. Curiosity, caution, perhaps even a grudging acceptance of this unusual human who has somehow earned his mate's trust. Elena remains seated as Esperanza climbs the gentle slope toward her position. By now, she's learned the patterns of this extraordinary ritual. The mare will approach to within about 15 feet, stop, and simply stand in quiet presence for several minutes before returning to her family. No physical contact, no domesticated behaviors, just a profound acknowledgement of the connection they share. Today, however, something changes. When Esperanza reaches the usual distance, she doesn't stop. Instead, she continues forward with measured steps until she stands barely 6 feet from where Elena sits, frozen in astonishment. "Hello, beautiful girl," Elena whispers, hardly daring to breathe as the wild mare regards her with liquid brown eyes that seem to hold ancient wisdom. For several heartbeats, they simply gaze at each other, wild and human, separated by millennia of evolutionary divergence, yet connected in this moment by something that transcends those differences. Then, with exquisite delicacy, Esperanza extends her muzzle toward Elena, nostrils flaring gently as she takes in the human scent. Elena remains perfectly still, overwhelmed by the privilege of this moment. Never in her 15 years of Mustang conservation has she experienced such deliberate, trusting approach from a completely wild horse, especially one who had known only freedom, never human handling. After what feels like an eternity but is probably only 30 seconds, Esperanza tosses her elegant head and turns, trotting back down the slope to where her family grazes. Elena releases the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, tears of wonder pricking at her eyes. She fumbles for her journal with trembling hands, needing to document this extraordinary interaction while it's fresh. As she writes, Elena struggles to maintain scientific objectivity. This encounter challenges everything: Conventional wisdom teaches about wild Mustang behavior toward humans. Yet she cannot deny the evidence before her. This mare has chosen to initiate contact, to acknowledge connection across the species barrier that typically separates wild horses from human observers. The implications stagger her. If wild Mustangs possess this capacity for recognition and selective trust, how might that reshape conservation approaches? The standard management techniques for wild horse populations on public lands, helicopter roundups, permanent removal from native ranges, fertility control without regard for family structures, suddenly seem even more barbaric in light of the sophisticated social awareness she's witnessing. Elena is so absorbed in her thoughts that she nearly misses the dust cloud rising on the eastern horizon. Through her binoculars, she makes out 3 approaching vehicles, following the boundary road that separates sanctuary land from the neighboring cattle ranch owned by Harlan Wade. A vocal opponent of wild horse conservation and frequent critic of the sanctuary's work, tension immediately tightens Elena's shoulders. Harassment from neighboring ranchers isn't uncommon. They resent the protected status of the sanctuary lands and the Mustangs who occasionally wander beyond its boundaries to graze. But something about the deliberate approach of these vehicles sets alarm bells ringing in Elena's mind. She quickly packs her notebook and mounts Whisper, urging the mare into a steady trot along the ridgeline to intercept the approaching vehicles before they disturb the grazing Mustangs. As she draws closer, Elena recognizes Wade's distinctive red pickup truck in the lead, followed by 2 identical government vehicles with Bureau of Land Management logos emblazoned on their doors. "Just what we need," Elena mutters, patting Whisper's neck as they pick their way down a rocky slope to reach the boundary road. By the time she intercepts the small convoy, they've stopped near a dilapidated section of boundary fence. She recognizes Wade immediately, a weathered man in his 60s with a perpetual scowl that deepens at the sight of her. The 2 BLM officials with him are strangers, dressed in the standard olive green uniforms of federal land managers. "Morning, gentlemen," Elena calls as she approaches, keeping her tone professionally neutral despite the unease churning in her stomach. "Something I can help you with?" "Ms. Blackwood," Wade acknowledges stiffly. "These officers are investigating reports of trespassing livestock." The older of the 2 BLM officials steps forward, extending a hand. "Jack Mercer, District Manager. This is my colleague, Evan Phillips. We've received complaints about Mustangs from your sanctuary grazing on adjacent BLM parcels and private ranchland." Elena shakes his hand briefly. "Our horses are free roaming within a designated sanctuary, Mr. Mercer. Sometimes they cross boundaries. That's the nature of wildlife. We have grazing permits for the adjacent public lands and compensate private landowners for any verified grazing on their property. The issue isn't just grazing," Phillips interjects, consulting a clipboard. "We've documented significant fence damage along the eastern boundary, consistent with horse movement. And Mr. Wade reports seeing a particularly aggressive stallion, leading a band of 7 horses that frequently trespass onto his property." Elena's heart sinks as she realizes they're describing Viento's family group. "I'm familiar with that band. The stallion isn't aggressive unless threatened. They've been staying within sanctuary boundaries for the past 3 weeks." Wade snorts derisively. "They were on my land yesterday, destroying a water development I just installed. That buckskin stallion charged my ranch hand when he tried to haze them back to your property. If your ranch hand was chasing them with vehicles or dogs, that would explain defensive behavior," Elena counters, struggling to keep her voice even. "That's not aggression. It's protecting his family. Mercer holds up a hand to forestall further argument. Ms. Blackwood, we're not here to assign blame. The BLM has a responsibility to manage wild horses on public lands. And when a specific band is causing repeated problems, we need to address it. A cold dread settles in Elena's stomach. What exactly are you proposing? Phillips answers, his tone bureaucratically neutral. We're planning a targeted gather operation focusing on this specific family band. They'll be processed at the holding facility in Rock Springs, with adoptable animals entering the adoption program and others relocated to long-term pastures in the Midwest. You want to round up Viento's family, permanently remove them from their home range? Elena doesn't attempt to mask her horror. These are wild animals living exactly as they should, as federal law protects their right to do. The wild free roaming. Horses and Burros Act also mandates management levels that prevent rangeland degradation, Mercer reminds her. The current population exceeds those levels. Not on sanctuary land, Elena insists. We're well within our carrying capacity, and we have agreements with the BLM about management approaches within the herd management area that includes our sanctuary. Those agreements explicitly prohibit helicopter roundups without prior consultation. Mercer, at least, has the grace to look uncomfortable. This situation represents a special case due to the reported aggression and property damage. We're planning a limited operation using bait trapping, not helicopters. Elena's mind races, thinking of Esperanza, Viento, Little Solana, the extraordinary trust they've developed, the unique window into wild horse cognition and behavior they represent. To have them captured, separated, shipped to holding facilities, where they'd be crammed into pens with hundreds of other terrified Mustangs. The thought is unbearable. I need to formally object to this action, she states firmly. Our sanctuary operates under a memorandum of understanding with your office that requires 30-day notice before any removal operations affecting horses that use sanctuary land as part of their home range. Wade makes a dismissive noise. Government can expedite that paperwork when public safety is at risk. There is no public safety risk, Elena fires back. There's a boundary dispute that could be resolved with proper fencing and respectful management practices. Mercer studies her for a moment. I understand your concerns, Ms. Blackwood, but the operation has already been approved by the state office. We're scheduled to begin setting up bait traps tomorrow, with active trapping to commence in 3 days. Elena feels as though the ground has dropped from beneath her. 3 days. Just 3 days to prevent the destruction of the remarkable family band she's come to know. To prevent the severing of a cross-species connection that could revolutionize understanding of wild horse. Cognition and behavior. I want to see the paperwork, she demands. All of it. The complaint documentation, the assessment reports, the approval signatures, and I'll be contacting our legal team immediately. Phillips hands her a thin manila folder. It's all in order. Ms. Blackwood, we're just doing our jobs. Elena takes the folder, tucking it securely into her saddlebag. And I'm doing mine. Protecting the Mustangs this sanctuary was established to conserve. Without waiting for a response, she turns Whisper and urges her into a trot, heading back toward the headquarters with new urgency thundering through her veins. Behind her, she hears Wade's derisive laugh, fueling her determination. Once out of sight of the men, Elena changes direction, circling back toward where Viento's family continues to graze, blissfully unaware of the threat now looming over them. She needs to document everything. Their location patterns, grazing, behaviors, water sources, anything that might help her fight the planned roundup. As she crests the ridge again, Elena spots Esperanza immediately. The Palomino mare has moved to higher ground and stands alert, as if somehow sensing the distant human discussion that just placed her family in jeopardy. Their gazes meet across the distance, and Elena feels a surge of fierce protectiveness. Unlike anything she's experienced before, "I won't let them take you," she whispers, the promise carrying on the wind. Not without one hell of a fight. Elena bursts through the door of the sanctuary's main office, startling Maya, who's on the phone with a potential donor. Seeing the storm in Elena's expression, Maya quickly wraps up the call and turns her full attention to her friend. "What happened?" she asks, immediately sensing trouble. Elena tosses the manila folder onto the desk, her hands shaking slightly. With contained fury, "The BLM is planning to round up Viento's family. Bait trapping starts in 3 days." "What? Why?" Maya pulls the folder toward her, flipping it open to scan the contents. Harlan Wade filed complaints about aggressive mustangs damaging his property. Eleanor paces the small office, unable to contain her agitation. "It's targeted specifically at Viento's band. Esperanza, Solana, all of them. They'll be separated, processed, shipped off to holding facilities." Maya looks up from the paperwork, her expression grim. "This authorization was signed yesterday. They fast-tracked everything, citing special circumstances. Wade's been gunning for that section of land for years," Elena says bitterly. "His ranch borders our best water sources. If he can eliminate the mustangs that use that area, he'll have leverage to challenge our water rights next." Maya scans further down the document. They're claiming pattern of aggressive behavior as justification for expedited removal. Did Viento actually charge someone? "I doubt it," Elena replies, finally dropping into a chair across from Maya. "Wild stallions can be territorial, especially when their families are threatened. If Wade's ranch hands were harassing them, which wouldn't be the first time, Viento might have displayed defensive posturing. That's not aggression, it's protection." Maya nods, understanding the distinction that bureaucrats often miss. "So, what's our move? Legal challenge?" "Already on it," Elena confirms, pulling out her phone to show the email she'd frantically composed while riding back to headquarters. "I've contacted Sarah at the Wild Horse Legal Defense Fund. She's reviewing our options for an emergency injunction." "That's good," Maya acknowledges, "but legal challenges take time, even expedited ones. We need immediate action too." Elena rubs her temples, trying to organize her racing thoughts. "First, we need to document Viento's family behavior. Prove they're not aggressive as claimed. I'll head back out with cameras, gather evidence of their normal behaviors around humans. I'll draft a formal response to the BLM notice," Maya offers, citing our memorandum of understanding and requesting formal consultation before any action. "And I'll contact Congressman Nichols," Elena adds. The congressional representative had been a staunch supporter of wild horse conservation efforts and had visited the sanctuary twice for fundraising events. Political pressure might buy us some time. They work frantically through the afternoon and into the evening. Elena makes dozens of calls to wildlife advocacy groups, sympathetic journalists, sanctuary donors with political connections. Maya meticulously documents every inconsistency and procedural irregularity in the BLM paperwork, building their case for an injunction. By nightfall, their small team has mobilized impressive resources. The Wild Horse Legal Defense Fund has agreed to file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. 3 major conservation organizations have issued statements supporting the sanctuary's position. A reporter from the regional public radio station is scheduled to visit tomorrow for an on-site interview. Yet despite these promising developments, Elena can't shake her deep unease. She knows how these bureaucratic battles often play out. By the time the legal proceedings reach any conclusion, the roundup will be complete. The horses already shipped to holding facilities where they'll be processed and dispersed across the country, their family bonds permanently severed. In the quiet of her cabin that night, Elena pores over topographical maps of the sanctuary and surrounding lands, searching for options beyond the legal and political channels they're pursuing. Her gaze keeps returning to the remote northwestern section of the sanctuary, a rugged area of box canyons and mesa tops seldom visited by either sanctuary staff or neighboring ranchers due to its difficult terrain. A horse family could remain there undetected for weeks, perhaps months, especially if supplied with supplemental water during dry periods. The idea forming in her mind is radical, perhaps even reckless, but she can't dismiss it. What if she could lead Viento's family to this remote section before the bait traps are set? Wild horses are intelligent creatures with excellent memory for geography. Once shown a route to good grazing and water, they often return to those areas seasonally. If she could guide them to safety and help them remain hidden until the legal efforts bore fruit. Elena shakes her head, trying to dislodge the dangerous thought. Moving wild horses without authorization could jeopardize her position at the sanctuary, perhaps even result in criminal charges for interfering with a federal operation. Yet the alternative, standing by while these extraordinary animals are captured and their remarkable family bonds destroyed, seems equally unbearable. Sleep eludes her as she wrestles with the ethical dilemma. By first light, she's made her decision, though she's careful to keep it to herself when she meets Maya at headquarters to coordinate the day's efforts. "I'm heading back out to document Viento's family behaviors," Elena announces, packing her camera gear and field notebook. "The more evidence we have of their non-aggressive interactions, the stronger our case." Maya hands her a thick envelope. "Here's the formal response to the BLM notice. Sarah says to deliver it directly to Mercer if possible. Makes it harder for them to claim they didn't receive proper notification." Elena tucks the envelope into her saddlebag, alongside extra water and emergency supplies she's packed for what may become a very long day in the field. "Any word from Congressman Nichols' office?" His aide called this morning. He's reaching out to the state BLM director personally, but can't promise immediate results. "Every bit helps," Elena replies, keeping her plans carefully concealed behind a mask of professional determination. "I'll be back before dark." As she saddles Whisper for the day's journey, Elena feels the weight of her decision. What she's considering goes beyond advocacy into direct intervention, a line she's never crossed in her conservation career. Yet the memory of Esperanza's trusting approach, the miracle of their cross-species connection, strengthens her resolve. Some bonds transcend bureaucratic designations and legal classifications. Some spirits deserve extraordinary measures to protect their freedom. Elena rides first to the area where she typically encounters Viento's family, scanning the gently rolling hills for signs of the mustangs. She spots them near a spring-fed creek, the 7 horses grazing peacefully in the morning light. She keeps her distance at first, documenting their natural behaviors with her telephoto lens. The calm interactions, the family bonds evident in their positioning and communication, the complete absence of the aggression claimed in Wade's complaint. After gathering sufficient photographic evidence, Elena begins the next phase of her plan. She positions herself where Esperanza will notice her presence, hoping the remarkable connection they've established might serve a purpose she never anticipated. Within minutes, the Palomino mare raises her head, ears pricked forward as she identifies Elena's familiar silhouette against the skyline. For several breathless moments, Elena waits as Esperanza seems to consider the situation. Then, just as she's done multiple times before, the mare begins walking deliberately toward her human observer. This time, however, Elena remains mounted on Whisper, a calculated decision she hopes will communicate different intentions to the intelligent wild horse. As Esperanza approaches to within 30 yards, Elena clicks softly to Whisper, urging her into a slow, deliberate walk along the ridgeline, frequently glancing back to see if the wild mare follows. To her immense relief, Esperanza does follow, maintaining a cautious distance but clearly tracking their movement. Viento notices immediately, giving a low nicker that brings the entire family to attention. After brief hesitation, the stallion leads the rest of the band in Esperanza's wake, their curiosity apparently overcoming their natural caution. Elena keeps the pace deliberately unhurried, leading the Mustang family along a meandering route that gradually trends northwest toward the remote sanctuary section she'd identified. She stops frequently, allowing the wild horses to graze and drink from streams they cross, never pushing them or creating pressure that might trigger flight. This isn't a roundup or forced movement. It's an invitation that the Mustangs are choosing to accept, following the human and domestic horse who have somehow earned a measure of their trust. By midday, they've traveled several miles into increasingly rugged terrain. Elena watches with satisfaction as Viento leads his family across a narrow arroyo that effectively screens them from view from the main sanctuary roads. Beyond lies a hidden valley rich with grasses and equipped with a spring-fed pool that rarely dries even in drought conditions. Perfect temporary refuge while the legal battle plays out. As they enter this secluded haven, Elena dismounts, allowing Whisper to drink from the clear pool while she observes the wild horses exploring their new surroundings. Viento moves with the heightened alertness of a stallion, assessing potential territory, testing wind currents, and investigating sightlines with the instinctive security consciousness of a family protector. Esperanza leads the other mares and foals to the water, the golden Solana prancing excitedly at the discovery of the fresh pool. Elena remains at a respectful distance, her heart full as she witnesses the Mustang family claiming this protected space. She realizes with profound satisfaction that they're unlikely to leave this hidden valley anytime soon. It offers everything they need, and the difficult access routes make it unlikely that Wade's ranch hands or BLM officers will discover them here without specific knowledge of their location. As afternoon shadows lengthen, Elena prepares to leave the Mustangs in their new sanctuary. She's accomplished what she set out to do, guide them to safety without forcing or frightening them. Whether it buys enough time for the legal challenges to succeed remains to be seen, but she's given them a fighting chance to remain together and free. Before departing, Elena removes a small GPS tracking device from her saddlebag and carefully conceals it in rocks overlooking the valley. The device will allow her to monitor activity in the area remotely, alerting her if vehicles approach or if the mustangs leave their secluded refuge. As she mounts Whisper for the return journey, Elena takes one last look at the remarkable family, band grazing peacefully in their hidden valley. Esperanza raises her head as if sensing Elena's imminent departure, and for a moment their gazes lock across the distance. The mare tosses her golden mane in what Elena can only interpret as acknowledgement. Wild and human, connected by an understanding that transcends conventional boundaries. "Stay safe," Elena whispers before turning Whisper toward home, carefully choosing a different route than the one they'd used on the inbound journey to minimize traceable signs of their passage. The sun is setting by the time Elena returns to Sanctuary headquarters. Maya rushes out to meet her, excitement evident in her expression. "We got the emergency hearing," she announces triumphantly. "The judge granted expedited review based on our memorandum of understanding with the BLM. They can't proceed with any roundup activities until after the hearing." Relief floods through Elena. "When's the hearing?" "Day after tomorrow in Cheyenne," Maya replies. "Sarah says we have a strong case for procedural violations at minimum. It should buy us time for a full review." Elena nods, keeping her afternoon's activities to herself for now. The legal challenge provides perfect cover for the Mustang's mysterious disappearance from their usual range. By the time the BLM realizes Viento's family is no longer in the area where they plan to set bait traps, the injunction should be in place, blocking further action. "That's excellent news," she says simply, dismounting and beginning to unsaddle Whisper. "Did you reach the reporter?" "She'll be here first thing tomorrow. The story will run on the evening news." As they walk toward the stables together, Maya gives Elena a sideways glance. "You were gone a long time today. Find anything interesting?" Elena meets her friend's perceptive gaze, calculating how much to share. "Just evidence that Wade's complaints are fabricated. I didn't see any sign of aggression from Viento, even when I deliberately made myself visible to the family. It's not exactly a lie, just a careful omission of her more consequential activities. Elena will tell Maya everything eventually, but for now, plausible deniability seems the wisest course. The fewer people who know the Mustang's location, the safer the horses will be." That night, checking the GPS tracker on her tablet, Elena sees the small cluster of dots representing Viento's family still safely ensconced in their hidden valley. She allows herself a small smile of satisfaction as she closes the tracking app. For now, at least, these extraordinary wild spirits remain free, their remarkable family bonds intact. Whether through legal channels or unorthodox intervention, she's determined to keep them that way. Morning brings a flurry of activity to the sanctuary. The public radio reporter Vanessa Chen arrives early with her recording equipment, eager to document the developing controversy. Elena leads her on a tour of the sanctuary, explaining their conservation philosophy and the unique challenges of protecting America's wild mustangs in an era of shrinking habitat and competing land interests. "Our approach is rooted in respect for their wild nature," Eleanor explains, as they stand on a ridge overlooking a distant band of mustangs. Not Viento's family, of course, but another group that routinely grazes the eastern meadows. "We don't intervene unless absolutely necessary for their welfare. These animals represent our national heritage, living symbols of the American West." Vanessa's questions are insightful, focusing on the complex tensions between wildlife conservation, traditional ranching interests, and federal land management policies. When they return to the office for a formal interview, Elena provides a detailed timeline of events leading to the current confrontation with the BLM, carefully emphasizing the procedural irregularities and the sanctuary's legal standing. What we're seeing here is a circumvention of established protocols, Elena states firmly for the recording. The Memorandum of Understanding between our sanctuary and the Bureau of Land Management explicitly requires consultation before any roundup operations affecting horses that utilize sanctuary lands. That consultation never happened. Vanessa nods, making notes. And what about the claims of aggressive behavior? The BLM documentation mentions a pattern of threatening encounters. We've observed no such pattern, Elena counters, retrieving her camera to show Vanessa the photographs she'd taken yesterday. These images show the family band in question interacting peacefully with humans at a respectful distance. Wild stallions will display protective behaviors if their families are threatened, but that's natural defensive behavior, not aggression. She chooses her next words carefully, aware of their strategic importance. I'm particularly concerned about this hastily organized roundup because this specific family band has shown remarkable cognitive abilities and social structures that we've been documenting for scientific research. Separating them would not only be traumatic for the horses, but would terminate a valuable opportunity to better understand wild Mustang intelligence and behavior. This isn't merely a tactical statement. Elena genuinely believes in the scientific value of what she's witnessed with Esperanza and her family. The extraordinary trust and communication they've demonstrated challenges conventional understanding of wild horse cognition, offering insights that could reshape conservation approaches if properly documented and analyzed. After Vanessa departs, promising the story will air on that evening's broadcast, Elena checks her tablet for the GPS tracker's signal. The cluster of dots remains in the hidden valley, apparently settled into their temporary sanctuary. Relief washes through her, followed immediately by renewed determination. The legal battle has only just begun. Maya appears in the doorway of Elena's office, her expression serious. Wade's at the front gate with Mercer. They're demanding to speak with you. Elena takes a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. Let them in. I'd rather keep this civil. Minutes later, Harlan Wade's imposing frame fills her office doorway, his weathered face set in hard lines of anger. BLM District Manager Jack Mercer follows, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Your Mustangs have disappeared, Blackwood, Wade states without preamble, his voice gruff with accusation. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Elena maintains a neutral expression. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Wade. Wild horses move according to grazing conditions and water availability. They're not static fixtures on the landscape. Mercer steps forward, his tone more diplomatic than his companions. Ms. Blackwood, our team conducted a preliminary survey of the area this morning in preparation for tomorrow's planned bait trap installation. The specific band identified in our removal authorization appears to have relocated. Given the timing, we have concerns about potential interference. Are you suggesting I rounded up wild horses myself? Elena asks, allowing a note of incredulity to enter her voice. With what equipment? Our sanctuary operates on a conservation philosophy opposed to roundups of any kind. Wade snorts derisively. Those horses didn't just vanish. They've been in that eastern valley for weeks, and suddenly they're gone the day after we notify you of removal plans. Wild mustangs routinely travel miles in a single day, Elena counters calmly. It's entirely possible they've moved to different grazing areas within the sanctuary boundaries, areas you don't have authorization to enter, I might add. Mercer clears his throat awkwardly. We're not making accusations, Miss Blackwood. We're simply trying to locate the mustangs identified in our operation plan. And I'd be happy to help you locate them, Elena replies smoothly. After tomorrow's emergency hearing determines whether your operation plan was properly authorized in the first place. Wade's face flushes with anger. This is obstruction of a federal operation. No, Elena corrects him firmly. This is adherence to the legally binding Memorandum of Understanding between this sanctuary and the Bureau of Land Management, an agreement your office appears to have disregarded, Mr. Mercer. The BLM manager shifts uncomfortably. As I explained, yesterday we're operating under special circumstances provisions due to the reported aggressive incidents. Alleged incidents, Elena emphasizes, that my staff and I have been unable to verify despite extensive observation of this specific family band. Incidents that conveniently serve Mr. Wade's long-standing interest in reducing Mustang populations. Near his property, Wade takes a menacing step forward. You're accusing me of lying, Blackwood? I'm stating facts, Elena replies, standing her ground despite his intimidating presence. You've publicly advocated for reducing wild horse populations on multiple occasions. You've contested our water rights 3 times in the past decade, and now you've filed complaints that directly contradict our documented observations of these horses' behavior. Mercer raises a hand to interrupt the escalating tension. The hearing will address these disagreements. Until then, our operation is temporarily suspended by judicial order. However, Ms. Blackwood, I should inform you that interfering with a federal Mustang management operation, including deliberately relocating targeted animals, could constitute a criminal offense. I'm well aware of the legal boundaries, Mr. Mercer, Elena responds coolly, just as I'm aware of the procedural requirements your office chose to ignore in this case. The tense standoff continues for several more minutes before Wade and Mercer finally depart, leaving Elena with the distinct impression that this confrontation has only intensified the rancher's determination to see Viento's family removed. As soon as their vehicles disappear down the sanctuary's access road, Maya turns to Elena with raised eyebrows. You know exactly where those horses are, don't you? Elena hesitates, then nods slightly. The less you know right now, the better. Plausible deniability. Maya studies her friend for a long moment. You did something crazy, didn't you? I did. What was necessary? Elena admits quietly. They're safe, that's all that matters. Maya sighs, shaking her head with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. Just be careful. Wade doesn't strike me as someone who gives up easily. The remainder of the day passes in frantic preparation for tomorrow's hearing. Elena works closely with Sarah Jenkins, the attorney from the Wild Horse Legal Defense Fund, reviewing documents and preparing testimony about the sanctuary's observations. Of Viento's family, Sarah is cautiously optimistic about their chances for an extended injunction, especially given the procedural violations they've documented. The expedited removal authorization requires clear and immediate danger to public safety, Sarah notes during their afternoon conference call. Their own documentation doesn't substantiate that standard. At minimum, we should be able to force them back to the standard consultation process. That evening, Elena checks the GPS tracker again before preparing for the 3-hour drive to Cheyenne tomorrow morning. The Mustang family remains in the hidden valley, apparently settling into their temporary home. She allows herself a moment of cautious hope. If the legal strategy works, they might secure enough time to establish more permanent protections for this remarkable family band. Her sleep is restless, fragmented by dreams of running horses and bureaucratic mazes. She wakes before dawn, checking the tracker one last time before dressing for court in her rarely worn business attire, a concession to the formality of legal proceedings that feels constraining after days spent in the saddle. The drive to Cheyenne passes in a blur of rehearsed arguments and contingency planning. Sarah meets them at the federal courthouse, looking professional and confident in her tailored suit. "Remember," she advises as they climb the courthouse steps, "focus on the procedural violations and the sanctuary's legal standing. The judge won't want to wade into the broader politics of wild horse management." The hearing room is smaller than Elena expected, with just enough seating for the key parties involved. Harlan Wade sits in the front row, behind the BLM's legal team, his expression stormy. Mercer sits beside the government attorney, reviewing documents with a furrowed brow. When the proceedings begin, the government attorney presents their case first, arguing that the expedited removal authorization was justified by the pattern of aggressive behavior and property damage documented in Wade's complaints. They emphasize the BLM's statutory authority to manage wild horse populations on public lands, including adjacent areas that impact federally managed herds. Sarah presents their challenge methodically, walking the judge through the specific language of the sanctuary's memorandum of understanding with the BLM and highlighting the consultation requirements that were bypassed. She introduces Elena's photographic evidence showing the family band's normal, non-aggressive behaviors, contrasting it with the unsubstantiated claims in Wade's complaints. When Elena takes the stand to provide testimony about her observations of Viento's family, she chooses her words carefully, emphasizing scientific observation while avoiding any hint of her direct intervention in relocating the horses. "In my professional assessment," she states firmly, "this family band displays typical protective behaviors consistent with wild Mustang social structures, but no pattern of unprovoked aggression toward humans. The stallion maintains appropriate distance and only displays warning behaviors when the family is approached too closely or threatened." The government attorney's cross-examination focuses on trying to establish that Elena might have interfered with the planned removal operation. "Miss Blackwood, do you have any knowledge of why this specific family band might have suddenly relocated from their established territory immediately after you were notified of the removal authorization?" Elena meets his gaze steadily. Wild Mustangs naturally travel significant distances in response to various environmental factors: water availability, grazing conditions, presence of predators or perceived threats. Their movement patterns often appear to have intention and intelligence behind them that we don't fully understand. That's precisely why our sanctuary focuses on observation rather than intervention. It's not exactly a lie, just a careful navigation around direct admission of her actions. The attorney seems frustrated by her response, but moves on without pressing further. After 3 hours of arguments and testimony, the judge announces she'll take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling by the end of the day. As they exit the courthouse, Elena feels cautiously optimistic about their chances for at least a temporary reprieve. Her optimism shatters when she checks her phone and sees 3 missed calls from Maya, followed by a text message that sends ice through her veins. Wade's ranch hand spotted heading toward NW section with trucks and trailers. Call immediately. Elena's heart pounds as she dials Maya's number, stepping away from Sarah and the courthouse crowd for privacy. What's happening? She demands as soon as Maya answers. One of our volunteers was checking fence lines and spotted Wade's men heading into that remote northwestern section with horse trailers. Maya explains rapidly. 4 men on ATVs, 2 trucks with trailers. They're not even trying to be subtle about it. Elena's mind races. How could Wade have known where to look? Had she been followed yesterday? Had someone at the sanctuary leaked information? Regardless of how, the immediate threat to Viento's family is clear. I'm 3 hours away, she says, her voice tight with urgency. Can you get out there? Already on my way, Maya confirms. I've got the satellite phone and camera. I'll document everything, but Elena, if they've found them, do whatever you can to slow them down legally. Elena instructs, already running toward her truck. Record everything. Call the sheriff if they're trespassing on sanctuary property. I'm on my way. She ends the call and turns to Sarah, who was followed with concern written across her face. I have to go. Emergency at the sanctuary. What's happening? The attorney asks. Wade's men are trespassing on sanctuary land, Elena explains hurriedly. Looks like they're trying to capture horses while we're tied up in court. Sarah's expression hardens. That's blatantly illegal if they're on your property. I'll call the U.S. Marshal's office immediately. This could be interpreted as interference with federal court proceedings. Elena nods gratefully before sprinting to her truck. As she pulls away from the courthouse, her phone buzzes with an incoming message. A photo from Maya showing fresh ATV tracks cutting across a sanctuary access road, heading directly toward the hidden valley where Viento's family has taken refuge. The 3-hour drive back to the sanctuary stretches before her like an eternity. Elena presses the accelerator, her mind filled with images of Esperanza, Viento, and little Solana being chased by Wade's men, loaded into trailers, their freedom and family bonds destroyed while she sits helplessly in traffic. Hold on, she whispers to the empty truck cab, as if the Mustangs could somehow hear her desperate plea across the miles. Just hold on. The truck's engine roars as Elena pushes it to its limits, racing along the highway back to Wind River. Her knuckles are white against the steering wheel, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Every few minutes, she checks her phone, hoping for updates from Maya while dreading what those updates might contain. Halfway back to the sanctuary, her phone rings. It's Maya, her voice breathless and tense over the speaker. Elena, I'm at the North Ridge overlooking the valley. Wade's men are down there with the horses. Have they captured any? Elena asks, her voice tight with fear. Not yet. They've set up portable corrals and are trying to herd them, but Viento is keeping the family together, moving them away from the men. The terrain is working in their favor. The trucks and ATVs can't follow where they're going. Relief floods through Elena momentarily. Smart boy, she murmurs, thinking of the proud buckskin stallion. But Elena, Maya continues, they're bringing in more men on horseback. I count 3 riders approaching from the east. They're trying to circle around and cut off the Mustang's escape route. Elena's momentary relief evaporates. Wild horses can outmaneuver vehicles in rough terrain, but experienced riders are another matter entirely. Keep documenting everything, she instructs. I'm still over an hour out. Has the sheriff responded? Deputies are en route, but it'll be at least 40 minutes before they reach this section. It's too remote. The line crackles with static as Maya moves to a different position. When her voice returns, it carries new urgency. Wait, something's happening. Esperanza just broke away from the group. Elena, I think she's trying to lead the men away from the others. She's running toward the eastern ridge, and two of the riders are following her. Elena's heart clenches. The image of the Palomino mare deliberately drawing danger away from her family sears into her mind. It's exactly the kind of intelligent, self-sacrificing behavior she's come to expect from Esperanza, but knowing the mare is putting herself at risk is unbearable. Stay on them, Maya. I'm coming as fast as I can. The remaining hour passes in agonizing slowness despite Elena's reckless speed. The sanctuary's access road looms ahead and she swerves onto it, tires spraying gravel. She doesn't stop at headquarters, instead taking the rough maintenance road that will bring her closest to the northwestern section. When the road becomes impassable, Elena abandons her truck, grabbing her emergency kit and binoculars before setting off at a run across the familiar terrain. The sun hangs low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the landscape as she pushes herself toward the hidden valley. The sound reaches her before the sight, men shouting, engines revving, and piercing through it all, the high, panicked whinny of a horse in distress. Elena crests the final ridge, and the scene below steals her breath. The hidden valley has become a battleground. 2 horse trailers and several ATVs are positioned near the spring-fed pool. 3 of Wade's men are attempting to maneuver a frightened yearling into a portable corral, while 2 others on horseback pursue several mares trying to escape up a rocky slope. There's no sign of Viento, Esperanza, or Solana. Maya appears at her, side camera still recording. The sheriff's deputies are 5 minutes out, she reports. Wade's men caught that yearling and one of the older mares. But Elena, she pauses, her face grave. They've been using stock whips. I've got it all on video. Elena's blood boils at the thought of these magnificent wild creatures being terrorized with whips. Using such methods on wild horses isn't just cruel, it's illegal under federal wild horse protection laws. Where are Esperanza and the others? She demands. Maya points to the eastern canyon. Esperanza led 2 riders in that direction about 40 minutes ago. Viento and Solana, along with 1 other mare, broke toward the north. They're scattered. Elena. A flash of movement catches Elena's eye. A ranch hand on an ATV is pursuing a panicked mare up a dangerously steep slope. The wild horse is pushing herself beyond safety in her desperation to escape. That's enough, Elena shouts, sliding down the ridge toward the valley floor. She strides directly toward the nearest of Wade's men, righteous fury propelling her forward. The man turns in surprise, his hand still gripping a stock whip. This is none of your business, Blackwood, he growls. These horses are being removed under BLM authorization. That's a lie, and you know it, Elena fires back. There's an active court order preventing any roundup activities. You're trespassing on sanctuary property and violating federal law. A familiar voice cuts through the confrontation. They're on my property, Blackwood. Elena whirls to see Harlan Wade himself, emerging from behind one of the trailers, a satisfied smirk on his weathered face. This land is sanctuary property, Elena counters, gesturing to the valley around them. Wade's smirk widens. Check your boundaries again. This northwest corner, this specific valley, sits on an overlap between your land grant and my mineral. Rights lease. Been that way for 15 years, though you sanctuary folks never seem to notice the survey discrepancy. Elena's mind races. Could he be right? The sanctuary's northwestern boundary had always been defined by natural features rather than formal survey markers. If there was indeed an overlap or disputed section, the distant wail of sirens interrupts her thoughts. The sheriff's deputies are approaching. Wade gestures to his men. Secure those two we've caught and pull out. We've made our point. As the men scramble to load the captured yearling and mare into the trailers, Elena steps forward. You're not taking those horses, Wade. Not until a court determines boundary rights. Wade regards her coldly. Watch me. The standoff stretches. Between them, neither willing to back down. Then another sound rises above the approaching sirens, the thundering of hooves, and a stallion's powerful challenge call. Everyone turns to see Viento appearing on the ridge above the valley. His powerful frame silhouetted against the sunset sky, the buckskin stallion rears, pouring at the air in magnificent defiance before disappearing back over the ridge. Wade's men exchange uneasy glances. Wild stallions are unpredictable and potentially dangerous when their families are threatened. Boss, maybe we should go, one suggests nervously. Sheriff's almost here, and that stud looks ready to charge. Wade glares at Elena, hatred plain in his eyes. This isn't over, Blackwood. Not by a long shot. He turns to his men. Leave the horses. We'll sort this out with the proper authorities. As Wade and his men hastily pack up their equipment, Elena rushes to the portable corral. The captured yearling trembles with fear, while the older mare stands protectively beside it. Neither appears physically injured, but the psychological trauma is evident in their wild-eyed panic. Maya joins her, camera still recording. The deputies are pulling in now. And Elena, look. Elena follows Maya's gaze to the eastern slope, where a flash of gold catches the fading sunlight. Esperanza stands watching from a safe distance, her elegant head held high as she observes the humans below. She appears unharmed, having apparently outmaneuvered or outlasted her pursuers. Relief floods through Elena at the sight of the Palomino mare safe and free. But her relief is tempered by the weight of Wade's claim. If there truly is a boundary dispute over this valley, the sanctuary's ability to protect Viento's family and all the Mustangs who use this land could be in jeopardy. As the sheriff's deputies arrive and begin taking statements, Elena's gaze returns to the ridge where Viento had appeared. The stallion is gone, but his defiant call still echoes in her memory, a reminder that these wild spirits will not surrender their freedom easily, and neither will she. The battle for their future has only just begun. Dawn breaks over the sanctuary, painting the landscape in pale gold light. Elena hasn't slept. The events of yesterday play on endless loop in her mind. Wade's men pursuing the terrified Mustangs, the captured yearling's trembling form, Esperanza leading riders away from her family with deliberate intelligence. After the sheriff's intervention, Wade and his men had departed, but not before serving Elena with papers claiming disputed ownership of the northwestern valley. The captured horses were released, reuniting with several members of their scattered family before disappearing into the rugged terrain beyond the valley. Elena sits in the sanctuary's small office, surrounded by survey maps and property records, spread across every available surface. Maya enters with 2 mugs of coffee, setting one beside a particularly ancient-looking boundary document. "Any luck?" she asks, surveying the chaos of papers. Elena rubs her eyes wearily. "Maybe. The original sanctuary land grant from 1987 defines the northwestern boundary, using Cougar Creek as the dividing line. But the creek's path has shifted over the decades due to erosion and flooding. And Wade's claim, his mineral rights lease from 2008, uses GPS coordinates that would place about 30 acres of what we've always considered sanctuary land within his leased territory, including that hidden valley." Maya drops into a chair opposite Elena. "Can he legally round up wild horses based on a mineral rights lease?" "No," Elena says firmly. "Mineral rights don't confer surface rights to wildlife. But if he can prove the land isn't technically part of our sanctuary, he could argue the horses there aren't under our protected status. He could petition the BLM to remove them as excess population affecting his lease operations." The phone rings, interrupting their discussion. It's Sarah Jenkins from the Wild Horse Legal Defense Fund. "We got the injunction," she announces without preamble. The judge was furious about Wade's actions while the matter was under court consideration. All roundup activities are suspended for 30 days pending full review. "That's something. At least," Elena responds, relief tempering her exhaustion. "But Sarah, we've got a new problem. Wade is claiming boundary discrepancies that might affect our protective jurisdiction." She explains the situation while Sarah listens carefully. "This complicates things," the attorney admits when Elena finishes. "Property boundary disputes can take months or even years to resolve in court. In the meantime, those horses remain vulnerable. Is there anything we can do to expedite the process?" "Possibly. Given the active conservation role of the sanctuary and the federal protections for wild horses, we might be able to request an emergency determination from the Department of Interior. It's a long shot, but I'll start working on it today." After ending the call, Elena turns to Maya. "I need to find Viento's family, make sure they're all accounted for after yesterday's chaos. I'll coordinate with the volunteers to increase boundary patrols," Maya offers. "If Wade tries anything else, we'll know immediately." Elena saddles Whisper, packing extra supplies for what might be an extended search. The Mustang family had scattered in multiple directions when pursued yesterday. Reuniting them all might take time. As she rides out, the sanctuary seems unnaturally quiet, as if the land itself is holding its breath. She follows the ridgeline above the disputed valley, scanning the landscape for any sign of the mustangs. The valley below shows evidence of yesterday's confrontation: churned earth from ATV tires, trampled grass where the portable corrals had stood. Elena continues north, following instinct more than tracking skill. If she were Viento, where would she take his family after such a traumatic encounter with humans? After an hour of searching, she spots them, not in the valley or open grasslands where they typically graze, but in a dense stand of junipers clinging to a steep hillside. The location offers excellent visibility across the surrounding terrain, while providing cover from anyone approaching. It's a defensive position chosen with the intelligence Elena has come to expect from the buckskin stallion. Through her binoculars, she counts the horses with immense relief. All 7 members of the family band are present, including Esperanza and Solana. They appear physically unharmed, though they stand closer together than usual. a clear sign of the stress they've endured. Elena remains at a distance, not wanting to add to their anxiety after yesterday's pursuit. She simply observes, documenting their condition and location in her notebook. As she watches, Esperanza detaches from the group, moving to a rocky outcropping that provides a better view of Elena's position. The Palomino mare stands motionless, her gaze fixed on the human observer with the same intense awareness Elena has witnessed before. There's something different in that gaze now, a wariness that hadn't been present during their earlier encounters. Yesterday's events have eroded some of the extraordinary trust they'd built. The realization cuts deep. Elena had worked so hard to establish that trust, to demonstrate that not all humans pose a threat to these wild creatures. Wade's men had undermined that work in a single afternoon of terrorizing pursuit. "I'm sorry," she whispers across the distance, knowing the mare can't possibly understand her words, but hoping somehow to convey her regret. "I'll make this right." Esperanza remains on her outcropping for several more minutes before rejoining her family. Elena takes this as her cue to depart, having confirmed their safety without disturbing their much-needed rest. On the ride back to headquarters, Elena's satellite phone buzzes with an incoming call. It's Congressman Nichols, returning her messages from yesterday. "I've been briefed on the situation," he says after Elena's terse update. "I've spoken with the regional director of the BLM. He's concerned about the procedural irregularities in this case." "Concerned enough to permanently cancel the removal authorization?" Elena presses. "Not yet, but he's agreed to honor the court's 30-day injunction without appeal. That gives us time to address the boundary dispute." 30 days isn't much. Time to resolve a property rights case. "No," the congressman agrees, "but it's enough time to explore other options." "Elena, have you considered applying for national heritage status for this Mustang family?" Elena's breath catches. National heritage designation for specific wild horse herds is extremely rare, granted only to bands with unique historical or genetic significance. It would place Viento's family under federal protection, regardless of whose land they roam across. "On what grounds?" she asks, mind racing with possibilities. "Your documentation of their unusual cognitive abilities and social structures could qualify. If these horses truly demonstrate the kind of intelligence and human recognition you've described, they represent a significant scientific and cultural resource. It's a long shot, but the possibility ignites new hope in Elena's heart." "What would we need to do?" "Documentation, extensive, scientific, irrefutable. Peer-reviewed studies would be ideal, but given the time constraints, even preliminary findings from qualified researchers might suffice. I can help fast-track the application, but you'll need compelling evidence." "I'll start immediately," Elena promises, her mind already cataloging the observations and interactions she's recorded over the past weeks. When she returns to headquarters, the sanctuary is buzzing with activity. News of yesterday's confrontation has spread, bringing volunteers and supporters to offer help. Elena finds Maya coordinating a group of university students who've arrived to assist with boundary patrols. "We've got more help coming," Maya reports. "The Sierra Club is sending representatives tomorrow, and 3 equine behavior specialists from CSU have offered to document the Mustang's activities for our legal case." Elena nods gratefully, then pulls Maya aside to share Congressman Nichols's suggestion about national heritage status. "It's perfect," Maya agrees immediately. I've been saying for weeks that what you've observed with Esperanza goes beyond typical wild horse behavior. This could be the key to protecting them permanently. We'll need more than my observations. Elena cautions. We need scientific documentation, multiple witnesses, video evidence, anything that substantiates their unusual cognitive abilities and social behaviors. The CSU researchers can help with that. And Elena, Maya's expression turned serious. You should try to recreate that trust interaction with Esperanza. If we can document her deliberate approach to you, her apparent recognition and communication attempts. She's wary now, Elena replies, remembering the mare's guarded stance on the outcropping. Yesterday's experience damaged the trust we'd built. Then rebuild it, Maya says simply. If anyone can, it's you. The next morning brings new challenges. The sanctuary's main access road is blocked by 3 of Wade's ranch trucks, their drivers claiming they're surveying property lines, while effectively preventing normal operations. The sheriff's deputies eventually clear them, but the message is clear. Wade intends to make the sanctuary's work as difficult as possible. Meanwhile, the CSU researchers arrive. Dr. Gabriela Reyes, a specialist in equine cognition, Dr. Marcus Tanner, who studies social structures in wild herds, and their graduate assistant, Jin Park, who brings sophisticated recording equipment to document the Mustang's behaviors. Elena briefs them on her observations of Viento's family, particularly Esperanza's extraordinary behavior. At first, I thought I was projecting, seeing what I wanted to see, she admits. But after she deliberately brought her injured foal to me for treatment, allowing me to approach and handle Solana while maintaining perfect calm herself, that's when I knew I was witnessing something beyond typical wild horse behavior. Dr. Reyes nods thoughtfully. There are documented cases of wildlife exhibiting what we might call interspecies cooperation or recognition of human assistance. Dolphins approaching divers to remove fishing line, elephants seeking human help with injuries. But in wild horses, especially completely unhandled Mustangs, that would be remarkable. How soon can we observe them? Dr. Tanner asks, eager to begin their documentation. They're currently sheltering in a juniper stand about 5 miles north, Elena explains. Given yesterday's traumatic experience, I suggest we approach very gradually over several days. Rushing might further damage their trust. The researchers agree, and a careful observation plan is developed. They'll begin with distant documentation, using telephoto lenses and directional microphones, gradually decreasing distance as the horses become accustomed to their presence. As preparations continue, Elena receives an unexpected call from Jack Mercer, the BLM district manager who had authorized the now suspended roundup. Ms. Blackwood, he begins awkwardly, I wanted to inform you personally that an internal review has been initiated regarding the expedited removal authorization for those Mustangs. Elena waits, sensing there's more to this call than a procedural update. The review was prompted by discrepancies in the documentation, Mercer continues, choosing his words carefully. Specifically, Mr. Wade's affidavit describing aggressive Mustang behavior contains details that conflict with other reports. What kind of discrepancies? Elena presses. Mercer hesitates. I probably shouldn't say more while the review is ongoing. But Ms. Blackwood, off the record, you might want to look into Wade's mineral rights lease application from 2008, particularly the environmental impact assessment section. The call ends, leaving Elena puzzled but intrigued. What had Mercer, been hinting at, and why reach out to her directly? She drives to the county records office that afternoon, requesting copies of Wade's original mineral rights lease application. Hours of sifting through dense legal documents yield a crucial discovery. Wade's lease had been approved based on an environmental assessment claiming the area had no significant wild horse activity and was unsuitable as critical habitat for protected species. Elena stares at the document, its implications suddenly clear. If Wade had misrepresented the land's ecological significance to obtain his mineral rights lease, the entire claim could be invalidated. And if the disputed northwestern section is indeed critical Mustang habitat, as the presence of Viento's family clearly demonstrates, it could be recategorized under stricter conservation designations. She's still processing this discovery when Maya calls with news that churns her stomach. Wade's filed an emergency petition with the state BLM office, Maya reports grimly. He's claiming the disputed land contains valuable mineral deposits that he's prepared to begin extracting immediately. If approved, it would allow him to start surface disturbance activities in 10 days, regardless of the court's injunction on Mustang removal. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. Tanner whispers excitedly. That was a clear communication exchange between them, and he's deferring to her judgment, despite his protective instincts. Esperanza continues her approach, stopping at approximately 50 yards from their position, much closer than wild Mustangs typically allow humans to come. She stands there, ears forward, gaze fixed directly on Elena. "She recognizes you," Dr. Reyes breathes, camera recording continuously. "This isn't general curiosity, this is specific recognition." Elena slowly rises from her crouch position, being careful to move smoothly and predictably. "I'm going to step forward," she tells the researchers quietly. "Keep recording, but please, remain absolutely still." With her heart pounding, Elena takes several steps toward the Palomino mare, then stops, allowing Esperanza to control the interaction. For several breathless moments, human and horse regard each other across the diminishing distance. Then, miraculously, Esperanza takes another step forward, then another. The mare stops when approximately 30 yards separate them, closer than she's come since before Wade's men chased the family. "Hello, beautiful girl," Elena murmurs, echoing the greeting she's used in their previous encounters. "I've missed you." Esperanza's ears flick forward at the sound of Elena's voice, her intelligent eyes never leaving the human's face. Then she does something that draws gasps from the watching researchers. She lowers her head slightly and paws once at the ground, then returns her gaze to Elena as if waiting for a response. It's a clear communication gesture, recognized by anyone familiar with equine behavior. Not aggression or fear, but acknowledgement, an invitation to continue this careful dance of reconnection. "She's communicating deliberately," Dr. Reyes whispers, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten in the wonder of what they're witnessing. "This is extraordinary." For the next 20 minutes, Elena and Esperanza engage in what can only be described as a conversation without words. Elena remains in place while Esperanza gradually decreases the distance between them, stopping every few steps as if reassessing her decision. When only 15 yards separate them, the mare makes a soft, nickering sound, then tosses her head toward the family group still watching from a distance. Elena understands the message with perfect clarity. This interaction is accepted, but the rest of the family remains off-limits. Boundaries re-established, trust cautiously renewed. "I understand," Elena says softly. "Thank you for trusting me again." As if satisfied with this exchange, Esperanza turns and walks unhurriedly back to her family, rejoining them with the quiet confidence of a decision well made. The researchers are nearly speechless with excitement as they review their recordings. That was not normal wild horse behavior, Dr. Tanner states emphatically. That was deliberate, reasoned interaction, recognition, memory, decision-making, all higher cognitive functions we rarely see demonstrated so clearly in wild equids. Did you notice how she communicated with the stallion? Dr. Reyes adds. That head toss that seemed to tell him to stay put. And he respected her decision despite his protective instincts. That suggests a complex social structure beyond typical harem. Dynamics. For the next week, this careful dance continues. Each day, Esperanza approaches a little closer, stays a little longer. By the 8th day, she allows Elena to approach within 10 feet, an extraordinary proximity for a completely wild Mustang. The mare seems to understand that Elena and the researchers pose no threat, despite the trauma inflicted by Wade's men. Meanwhile, the sanctuary's legal team makes progress on multiple fronts. The investigation into Wade's mineral rights lease uncovers additional discrepancies in his original environmental assessment. Sarah Jenkins files motions requesting the lease be suspended pending full review, citing new evidence of the land's ecological significance. The moment stretches fragile and precious as 3 species engage in a silent exchange of trust and recognition. Elena remains perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe, as Solana's soft muzzle hovers inches from her outstretched hand. Then Viento's sharp warning call breaks the spell. The stallion stands alert on the ridge above them, his posture signaling alarm. Elena follows his gaze and spots the dust cloud rising from the sanctuary's main access road, vehicles approaching, moving fast. Esperanza responds instantly to her mate's warning, guiding Solana back toward the safety of the family group. Before departing, the mare gives Elena one final look, a connection across species that needs no translation. Danger returns. Protection is needed. The vehicles turn out to be sanctuary volunteers rushing to deliver news. Wade's equipment, heavy machinery for mineral exploration, has arrived at the county depot. Surface disturbance activities are scheduled to begin in just 3 days unless legal intervention succeeds. As Elena and the researchers hurry back to headquarters, Dr. Reyes makes a decision. We're submitting our preliminary findings immediately, she announces. What we've documented here goes beyond interesting behavior. It represents a significant scientific discovery about wild horse cognition and social structures. I'm calling my department chair at CSU as soon as we get back. We need institutional weight behind these observations. Eleanor nods gratefully, but her mind is already racing ahead. The legal challenges and scientific documentation are proceeding, but time is running dangerously short. If Wade begins destructive activities in the disputed territory before their challenges are resolved, the damage to the Mustang's habitat could be irreversible. What Elena needs now is a contingency plan, a way to protect Viento's family if all other efforts fail. As the sanctuary buildings come into view, the outline of that plan begins to take shape in her mind. It's risky, potentially illegal, and could jeopardize her professional standing. But when weighed against the freedom and safety of these remarkable, wild spirits, there really is no choice at all. These Mustangs, this family, have demonstrated intelligence and trust that transcends the conventional understanding of wild animal behavior. Their protection is worth any personal risk Elena might need to take. As the sun sets over the Wind River Range, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Elena makes her decision. Some battles must be fought within the system through legal channels and scientific evidence, but others require direct action, courage in the face of powerful opposition. For Esperanza, Viento, Solana, and their family, Elena is prepared to fight both battles, whatever the personal cost may be. After weeks of legal battles, scientific documentation, and Elena's daring midnight relocation of the Mustang family to protected federal lands, victory finally comes. The Secretary of Interior, moved by the extraordinary footage of Esperanza's intelligent interactions with humans, grants emergency national heritage status to Viento's family. Wade's mineral rights claims are invalidated when his fraudulent environmental assessment is exposed. 1 year later, Elena watches from a distance as Esperanza leads her growing family across the expanded sanctuary lands, now permanently protected as the Wind River Wild Horse Preserve. The golden mare pauses, looking directly at Elena with that same knowing gaze that first connected them. Wild and human, bound by mutual respect and understanding. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed Elena's story of courage and conservation, please subscribe for more tales of the remarkable bonds between humans and animals. New chapters released weekly.